Hello internet denizens, this is Nezaraj bringing you a new video for the game Shadow of the Demon Lord, and this is the top 10 reasons on why you should be playing Shadow of the Demon Lord. If you already know, this is a tabletop role-playing game of a low to medium fantasy style in the same vein as like Pathfinder, D&D, and I'm making this video to spread the word about this game and why I think many people should be playing it. Currently, 5th edition and Pathfinder are the two biggest RPG games out there, and I want to put some reasons why I think this game is even better than those, and why you should give this game a try. I've been playing games for about 10 years now. I first started with 3.5 right when 4th edition and Pathfinder Alpha was coming out. I played a little bit of 3.5, a little bit of 4th edition, went almost into Pathfinder, played that for about 5 years exclusively. And since then, I've tried lots of new systems. I've grown as a role player. I've opened my eyes by playing so many new and different systems that after so many years and so many new experiences, the luster has kind of worn off. So diving in from the top, the first reason on why this game is so much fun is character creation. Character creation in Shadow of the Demon Lord is awesome. For the first, it's fun. There is a huge diversity in the core ancestries, which are how they call races in this game. Most D&D games, Pathfinder, is very human-centric. You have humans, half-orcs, half-elves, elves, halflings, gnomes, dwarves, etc. And they're very human-esque, right? So halflings, literally short humans. Gnomes are like halflings with some magic and colorful hair. Dwarves are short, stocky, bearded humans. Elves, tall, slender, pointy-eared humans. Half-orcs and half-elves are literally half-human. And it's very samey, right? It kind of all blends together. And I feel it's kind of lost its variety. Of course, there are many supplements, but just looking at the core races, it's kind of bland. Shadow of the Demon Lord, you get humans, of course, dwarves, alright. And then you get changelings, clockworks, goblins, and orcs. They're not even the steam powered, they're more the magic warforged kind of clockworks. Changelings are not even flesh and blood, they're like mud, sticks, stones, and they're animated with fey magic to come to life. And they have a shape-shifting ability to take on the form of other humanoid creatures, so they can look like almost any humanoid creature. Orcs, you got the full orcs, and these things are huge, like brutish things. Even humans, so let's look at humans real quick. Even humans have some interesting things. So if you look under humans, the first one, many variations. So skin tones, black, white, green, blue, orange, pink, or something else. Some have patterned skin, stripes, thick body hair, or no body hair. Between 3 and 7 feet tall, 50 to 500 pounds or more. So just if you want to pick a human, tons of options. If you want to play Donald Trump, John Boehner, bam, orange skin humans. Next we have racial levels. So if you look here for level 4, at level 4, instead of getting a class level or a path level in this game, you get a level in being a human. I think that's cool, and it gives you a little bonus further on for what ancestry you pick, and it gives you that much more flavor, that much more investment. And creating a character is super fun. You can either pick, or what I like to do is roll. You just roll on all of these charts, and it makes things super interesting, super fast. You just roll some dice, either a d20 or 3d6, and then you can do your background, personality, your age, your build, appearance. It makes it very fast, very interesting, gives you a wide variety of characters. All around, good job. Next, the races or ancestries are very balanced. If you look here at the starting attributes, they're all 10. You can increase one attribute by 1 to give you that a little bit of diversity. And your characteristics are secondaries based on your attributes. So your perception equals your intellect, defense equals your agility, health equals your strength, so on and so forth. Most everything is 0, more 10s. I think this makes it well balanced. If we look at one of the other creatures, let's look at changelings. Here we got 9, 10, 10, and 10. So one less, but your perception is a +1. I think this is great because a lot of times when you're making a character or you have a character concept in your head, it's always like race class combo, right? And I think Pathfinder, D&D with the racial modifiers and bonuses, you kind of lean towards a little bit min-maxy maybe. So here you can play whatever you want, and the bonuses are not that big, the penalties are not that strong. So if you have like a -2 dex but you want to be that rogue, it's kind of a detriment, especially for starting characters, but the ancestries in here are much more balanced. The last point we have for character creation are the interesting things. So every character gets an interesting thing. I know this feature has popped up in more recent games. I know 13th Age has one unique thing. I think 5th edition now also has a unique item. And these are just, you get one thing, you roll on the chart, or you can pick if you want, and it gives you a nice hook the GM can use in the story, or you can just put into your background. Why do you have this item? How did you get it? Makes for interesting characters. Overall, character creation, very fun, very interesting. When I've run one-shots, I actually include character creation in there because people have such an awesome time making things, and they're usually laughing out loud with some of the crazy results they get. Number 2 is the profession system. So professions replace skills. There are no skills in Shadow of the Demon Lord. It's a little similar to 5e with the backgrounds, but instead of getting a skill bonus, these cover your skills or use in place of them. So you get 2 professions. You can switch them out for bonus languages, but professions are what your character has done, what experience they have, what job they've worked, and you'll use that in the course of the game to inform what bonuses you would get on what rolls. So if you have a medicine profession, then anything to do with medicinal herbs or heal checks or diseases, anything like that, would give you a bonus because you have training, special training in this. The reason I like this is because it's very flexible and very intuitive. A lot of times when you pick a new path, which are classes in this, you can gain a profession, or sometimes your background. When you're creating your character, you'll get a role that'll say add a bonus profession. Sometimes you can pick it. Sometimes it'll be from a limited category. There's no wasted time for skill points. I know in Pathfinder especially, there's so many skill points, and it's like, oh, well, I need to take perception because that's like the master skill. And every time you level up, you get a certain amount of skill points. You got to like agonize over where to put them. It just wastes time, and it gets very mechanical. I think the profession system prevents the common scenario, which if you've been playing for any amount of time, the situation has occurred. Your character is doing something, you're in the moment, you're role-playing in the game, and then the DM calls for a skill check, and you realize you're not that good in the skill. And what do? You find out who in the party is good at the skill. You're doing a diplomacy check with the guard, you realize, hey, you don't have any ranks in diplomacy, or your charisma is really low, and you're like, okay, who has the highest diplomacy? Then like the bard will come up and you'll be like, oh, let me do the roll. And it breaks the immersion, the mechanics get in the way, and I don't like that. This way, you're not looking at your sheet, there are no numbers to look at, and you're more rewarded for just staying in the moment, being immersed, and just rolling with it and not caring about the numbers because there aren't any. Moving on. Point number 3 are core mechanics, which is the backbone of any game. I think Shadow Demon Lord is a very much streamlined and simplified system, but without being shallow, which is important. So, why do I think this is much better? Well, first of all, attributes are much simpler. So you get 4 attributes down from 6. You just get strength, agility, intellect, will. What do? Well, they inform your characteristics. So your strength tells you how much health you get. Your agility is your defense, which would be AC. Intellect is your perception, made a characteristic instead of a skill. Awesome. And your will tells you your insanity total. I like this because it's nicely balanced, it's logical, and it prevents any stat from being a dumb stat or from being a god stat. So let's be honest, 5th edition, Pathfinder, dexterity was the god stat, right? It went into your AC, it went into your ranged attack rolls, it went into your reflex saves, some of the best skills use dex. It was just such a good stat that even if you're a class that normally didn't use dex, you could always benefit from dex. I think this way, tying it into that every attribute has a characteristic is great. It makes it much simpler. Modifier is your -10 from your attribute. So if your strength is 12, your modifier is +2. Your agility is 14, your modifier is +4. Very easy to calculate. Much smaller numbers. The average you saw is 10, whereas in like D&D Pathfinder, you normally start at 8 or 10, and then you get all of these pluses you can put in, and you can get up to like 20s for starting characters. Huge numbers. I don't like that, because when you roll a d20 and your modifiers are already like +5 out of the gate, it makes the dice rolls much less important. Another really great feature is damage. So the best thing about damage is additive rather than subtractive. So when the creature objects take damage, add the amount of damage to the creature object's damage total. So you never subtract damage from your health normally. So there are like magical spells or something where you can take a penalty to health, but normally, just for normal combat, whenever you take damage, it's added up. So this is great because many things interact with your health, and if you're constantly raising and lowering it, making adjustments, that it changes stuff a lot. Anybody who's played a barbarian and your constitution goes up, so then your strength or your health goes up. But then when you leave, it goes down. But what if you took damage and you're positive, but then when you end rage, you're now negative or at 0? And there's all these different mechanics. You're constantly erasing on your character sheet, filling it in. This, you don't need it. You don't touch your health. And I think that's so much simpler. If your health is 10, when you take 10 damage, then you're unconscious, and there's the further mechanics about, death saving throws and whatnot. All right, next we have insanity and corruption. So what I like about this is it's another form of a health pool. If you don't have it, D&D Pathfinder, and you just see things, like dragons have frightened, but then it's boring, right? You're just feared, you're running away for however many rounds, however many feet. It's not very interesting. And there's some really things you can see that can traumatize normal people. Even heroes would probably be traumatized to have one of their party members cut right in half and their guts spill out everywhere. I like that there's a mechanic for that. Insanity is a good way to represent it. It gives you diversity in combat. So instead of just attacking their health pool and it's just some slugfest of who can get the other to 0 unconscious first, you can assault their mind and drive them insane. There's a nice madness chart, so you can get madnesses. Very good system. Corruption, I think, is even better. What corruption basically is the anti-murder hobo mechanic, which almost every fantasy game needs. Because we've all played D&D or Pathfinder, or I'm assuming we did, or even Shadowrun or other games, and characters that are more powerful than NPCs become murder hobos, right? Kill the magic item shop owner, steal his treasure. Town guard gives you gruff. He's a level 2 guard, level 2 fighter, maybe, or level 5. You just kill him. It removes all the social interaction, all the diplomacy. It makes life so simple if you can just kill everything. And it's a blight on gaming, to be honest. So corruption is there to prevent that. Corruption is a mechanical mark on you for doing bad things. So here it has how you get corruption. Murder. Awesome. Right there. Murder hobos, gone. Harming innocent people by spreading disease or being reckless with magic. So if you try to I didn't technically murder them, I did it by proxy or something. Nope. Still corruption. Stealing for personal gain. And this is very GM dependent. Obviously, if you have a rogue and he's stealing something, maybe you'll be like, okay, that's fine. That's kind of in character. So it's up to the GM to kind of enforce these, but the rules are there that you can give them. When they gain corruption, you start to get actual penalties on your rolls. Take a -1 on d6 when you decide your fate when incapacitated. Means coming back to life is much harder. If you die, you become incapacitated and you cannot be restored to life. Your soul is trapped in hell. Bam. Dead. You can also get marks of darkness, which are physical manifestations of corruption. So grow a pair of horns from your head. You weep blood. Your reproductive organs shrivel and fall off. Once each week, a child within one mile of you sickens and dies, right? All these cool things. There are expanded books also that have additional marks of corruption, especially for clockworks and things where biological ones don't make so much sense. But great flavor, great mechanic, prevents murder hobos, A+ recommended. Next part, we have our power. Power is your magic stat. What I love about this is if you're a newcomer to D&D or Pathfinder, or even if you've played a little bit, magic users are very complicated. Mostly because there are different kinds of spellcasters. They use different stats. They have different power levels, spellcasting levels. So you could be a full spellcaster like a wizard or sorcerer. You could be a half spellcaster like a druid. And they have different spell lists. So you have the wizard spell list, the druid spell list, the paladin spell list. You have divine magic, arcane magic. We'll talk about more about magic later, but the power score just tells you what level of spell you can cast. So what level of spell is equal to your power score? If your power is 2, you can cast second level spells and lower. If it's 4, fourth level spells and lower. That's it. Very easy, very intuitive. You don't need huge charts, different spell lists, whatever. Just power equals spell level you can cast. One of the final ones, getting down to the end, is static target numbers. So if we look down at target number here, the target number for challenge rolls is always 10. Doing a skill check, lockpick, diplomacy, whatever, it's 10. You get a 10, you succeeded. You might be saying, well, what if it's a difficult or an easy task? How do you modify it? We will talk about that in the next point, but I have one final point for the core mechanics, since the other one will be a subsystem, and that is going to be initiative. So initiative is very, very slick. There's no initiative score, right? So again, if you had like dexterity, for example, the god stat also influence initiative. What you do is you can get fast turns or slow turns. Fast turn is an action or a move, but not both. And a slow turn is you can do both. PCs always go first, GM goes after, unless there's like a surprise round. But normally it goes PC fast turn, GM fast turn, PC slow turn, GM slow turn. In those slow turns, characters can act in any order they want. There is no initiative score, no rolling. Whatever character says, I do this first, goes. If two people say it at the same time, they can roll off, or the GM can just decide which makes more sense or who they want to go first. Doesn't matter. This might be more awkward for larger groups if you have like 6+ people, but in my games, I usually keep it less than 5, so usually about 4 people, and there's no problem, nobody stepping on anybody's toes. And the slow and fast turn mechanic offers a very nice risk reward. So you can go fast and only get half of your actions, but you get to go first. Or you can go later on and you get to take all of your action. And it makes, if you're doing range or spellcasting, you don't have to move. It gives you, oh, I can not move and just take my turn. But then if something goes wrong after your turn, you can't move. Adds a little dynamic, makes combat a little more exciting while still being very freeform. So moving on to point number 4, this is a subsection of the core mechanics, and that is the boons and banes system. So a little while ago, I was talking about what if challenge rolls, skill rolls, attack rolls, what if they're harder or easier? How do you modify the target number of 10? Well, you have boons and banes. This is basically the 5th edition advantage and disadvantage, but done correctly and not suck. Not that advantage disadvantage is bad. I don't hate it inherently, but it is a little too simplified and it has some problems. The biggest being that it's very binary. Advantage disadvantage is either you have it or you don't have it. It doesn't upgrade. You can't get like 2 advantages. Once you have that feature, if you get like level 2 and you're like, okay, I get advantage on all attack rolls. Well, that never levels up. And so you get it, but it doesn't increase in power at all. And because they're both D20s, they can either be useless or overly powerful. So let's say you roll 2 advantages and you get like a 1 and a 4. Well, that was almost useless. Or you get a 16 and a 19. That's almost just as useless. And then on the other extreme, you could roll like a 2 and a 20. And those are miles apart. And it has these really wide, because it's 1 to 20, it's such a wide variance. Boons and banes is additional d6s you add to your rolls depending on boons or banes. So boons are added to your rolls, banes are subtracted. For example, if you make a d20 with 3 boons, you would roll 3d6. Say you get 1, 4, and 6 on those dice. The 6 is the highest number, so you add the 6 to your roll. So you only ever add 1 to your roll no matter how many you roll. But by adding multiple, you get a nice probability curve from a dice pool. But since you can only choose 1, it doesn't inflate the numbers too much, because the highest you can ever get is a 6. So it doesn't explode the math greatly as a d20 would, where the highest you can get is a 20, right? So here's a 6, there's a 20. I think this is really good because it's really fast, very elegant, and also just by looking at how many boons and banes you're rolling, you can see how powerful a spell is. If it's a spell that grants you 1 boon, it's probably not that powerful. If you're rolling 3 boons, you can tell it's much more powerful. This also allows a nice power increase because abilities can upgrade and add multiple boons. So let's say at level 2, you get 1 boon. Then level 4, you get 2 boons. Level 7, you get 3 boons. This allows abilities to upgrade and improve and feel like you're making progress much better than the advantage disadvantage where you just get it and then you're done. So I think this system is so much better because you can tell power just by looking at how many dice you're rolling. Just at a quick glance, you can see how powerful something is, and it creates a nice probability curve. So good, very good. Love it. Moving on to point number 5, we have the path system. So the path system is the quote-unquote class system for Shadow Demon Lord. Instead of classes, there's a branching pathway of quote-unquote classes. So at every few levels, you get a new branch. So first, you get Novice Pass, and you only get 4 choices. So you get Magician, Priest, Rogue, and Warrior. And these are basically your 4 archetypes. You know, you have like Wizard, Cleric, Rogue, and Fighter. This is nice because if you're new to the game, you can pick one of the 4 archetypes and you don't have to decide too much. You pretty much know in these 4 archetypes what kind of class you want to be. So for new players, it keeps the choice paralysis very simple to manage and easy to introduce new mechanics since they're introduced slowly. So let's take a look at Magician. So first, right, you get attribute increase 2 by 1. So notice this doesn't say you just get 2 points. It's 2 different stats by 1. So this helps from putting all your points just in one area. Then you get health increase and a power increase. Remember, power was tied to your magic. You get some languages or professions. You get magic. We will talk about magic later and one of the other points pretty soon. Cantrip, sense magic. And then here are other. As you'll see, 2, 5, and 8. So Shadow the Demon Lord only has 10 levels. But here, even at level 8, you're still increasing your base class. And then after that, so after these 4 main, the Novice Pass, then you get Expert Pass. So here you have 16 and the Novice 4. So right there you have 20 classes, and these are roughly divided into 4 paths: Faith, Power, Trickery, War. But if you look closely, these are not so, these are broad categories. They're not like strictly mechanical categories, because if you look, even in Path of War, you'll see a Spellbinder, which is a magic caster, and they imbue their weapons with magic. So here you have your Eldritch Knight, Gish class for your Fighter and Wizard. If you look on Trickery, you get a Warlock. So here, Assassin, Scout, Thief, physical melee damage, but then you have another magic dealer. So Stealers of Magic, you learn how to snatch other spells from casters' minds. Alright, and then this is at level 3. Then after that, we have Master Pass, level 7. And there are 64 paths. Oh my god, that's a lot. And they're roughly divided into magic and skill. And these are not limited. You can't, if you start with a fighter at level 1 or warrior, then you don't have to stick with melee fighter classes. You can branch into anything. You could be a fighter, assassin, bard if you want to be. There's nothing stopping you. You can mix and match anything. So this is like free multi-classing or prestige classing in other games, but there's no restrictions. Whenever you level up and you can gain a new path, you can pick any path you want. And it allows that as you play the game and you get more experience, it gives you more options and it kind of opens up and branches off and you can just pick anything you want. I think it's a super well-designed system, very fun, very flavorful. You can play this game tons of times and still never have the same combination of paths. Moving on to point number 6, we have equipment and inventory. So first, about encumbrance, carrying limits. You can carry or wear a number of items equal to your strength score. That's it. Bam. Strength score, you can carry that many items. If you go over that, but less than double your score, you're encumbered. You get all strength and agility rolls with 1 bane. So now you're asking, well, what counts as an item? So it goes over the most common things. So clothing, coins and gems, containers. So how much can you fit in your backpack? How many, what does clothing count as? How many weapons can I carry? This is all covered right here. This is the whole thing right here. Like 2 paragraphs covers all of your encumbrance and tracking stuff. Talking about armor, armor is very simple. This is the armor chart. Not as important as other games. You don't have to have like dragon bone hauberks and all kinds of weird stuff. It's just pick whatever armor you want, and you can see the first light armor modifies your agility. Then after that, it gives you a flat defense. So if you're wearing scale mail, your defense is 16 no matter what your agility is. So this kind of emulates the max dex in Pathfinder and some D&D games, but here it just says nope. Your defense is 16. That's all that matters. You don't have to worry about anything else. You do have to have a certain strength score. So if you're like a wizard and you didn't put any points into strength, then you obviously can't wear it. That takes care of that. There is no arcane spell failure chance. So if you are a wizard and you want to put points in like intellect and strength, you can do that and be a heavy armor wearing wizard. So let's look at weapons. First, ammunition, right? Everybody hates it. I like this rule. First one, if you're using ammunition other than bullets, you can recover about half. But there's an even better one, the abstract system, I really like. You're assumed to have enough ammunition to attack 5 times. After that, whenever your attack roll is basically a crit fail, you run out of ammo. And this one you can modify. There's very small chance you're going to crit fail within 5 turns, so you can just say whenever you crit fail, you run out of arrows. Or, maybe you're fighting and the crit fail means you fell down and they all fell out of your quiver, so it'll take a round to pick them up. Or maybe your quiver fell off and you lost your arrows. So you can abstract it however you want. I think this system is really good. So let's look at weapons, because this is pretty important in most games, but not very important in Shadow of the Demon Lord. If you'll notice, all of these are a variant of D6. So you have 1d6, 1d3, which is half a d6, 2d6, 3d6. Because Shadow of the Demon Lord only uses a d20 and d6s, all weapons are d6 based. Why I love this is because many times playing Pathfinder, you want to play a rogue, right? And you want to be like a dual wielding dagger rogue, but daggers suck. So what does everybody do? You get a rapier. So many rogues use rapiers because mechanically they're better. If you want like some kind of pole arm, well, you're like, oh, do I want a glaive or a halberd or a guisarme or, any kind of long handled bladed weapon. And you're sitting there and you're comparing the stats because you're not going to purposely hamstring yourself. And you want to have a trident, but the trident's not as good as a poleaxe. And then, so what you do is you just take the poleaxe, even though that's not what you really wanted. In this game, it doesn't really matter because a lot of your damage doesn't come from your weapon. It comes from the paths you pick. So those will increase your damage. Some paths even say, oh, if it's below this threshold, treat it as this damage instead. So you don't have to worry. If you want to wield daggers, go ahead and wield daggers. It's a very small part of your damage. If you're a rogue and you have your class feature like level 1 where you're like sneaking attack, you're doing like 2 extra d6. If you're doing 1d3 instead of 1d6, when you have the 2 other d6 on top of it, the difference is very small. Also gone are weapon types, so there's no slashing, piercing, bludgeoning, so you don't walk around like one of every weapon, be like, oh, it's a skeleton, my slashing doesn't work, I'm going to switch to my club for bludgeoning damage. No, just pick whatever weapon fits your character that you like, or even that you get in game that your game master gives you, and you don't have to be like, well, this is kind of useless because we're fighting undead and it's a piercing weapon which sucks, and you don't worry about it, just pick your weapon, it's good. Next we go into the big part and we get magic. Magic is awesome in this game. I don't generally play magic casters in a lot of D&D games because it's a lot to keep track of with all the spells, your spell slots, spell component stuff, which people ignore anyways, or you just issue material, feat. So instead of schools of magic, you have traditions, which are the groupings by what the spell does. And you can look right here, there are 30 traditions in the core rulebook. What I like is they're divided into 2 stats. So that's kind of like the intellect charisma split for wizard sorcerers. But why I like this is because it prevents that god stat, right? If you're a wizard And you're like, well, I'll just use intellect. Well, you can keep raising your intellect and ignore will, but what if you want to pick a will spell, like fire? But if you only do intellect, then your attacks with your will stat are going to be crap. So this encourages you to split your attributes evenly, or at least plan ahead on what kind of magic you want to learn. There's also dark magic. Again, this kind of factors in corruption. So necromancy, curse, and forbidden. Whenever you learn a new spell from these traditions, you gain corruption because they are pretty powerful and they're basically evil magic, so it corrupts your character. I believe there are some will forbidden ones in some of the supplement books. So let's look at the castings right here. This is the only chart you need in the whole game for casting magic. So castings by spell rank. So this may look a little like the Vancian system, but it is not. So here you have your power score. So remember, this is what spell rank you can cast. So if your power is 1, you can cast first level spells. If your power is 5, you can cast up to 5th rank spells. And this is how many castings of each spell you can have. The interesting thing, unlike D&D and Pathfinder, and which I actually misread the first time I was reading this book because I kind of had it ingrained in my mind for so long from playing Pathfinder, is these are not spell slots that if you want to cast the same spell twice, you have to memorize it twice. And once you cast the spell, it's gone. This is much different. So what this says is this 5 here, let's say your power is 4, right? This is not you get to cast 5 0-level spells. No. This is every 0-level spell you can cast 5 times. So if you have 5 0-level spells, that is 25 castings. This is so much better because it prevents that 5-minute workday where you're like, oh, I cast my 2 level 1 spells, I'm done for the day. You get tons of castings in this system, and they are pretty powerful even at low levels. Even this goes up to 10. In the core rulebook, there's only rank 5 5th level spells, or the highest level spells in the game. So let's look at some of the spells really quickly. A lot of spells have attack rolls 20 plus, so a lot of spells can crit in the game. So it'll have attack roll 20 plus if it has a crit effect, which I think is really cool. Some spells can be used on a triggered action. So this is new, kind of 5e has this now, where you have reactions. This is the reaction mechanic. So you can choose. So like attacks of opportunity are triggered actions, and instead of attacking like a melee attack, you can actually use some spells instead for a triggered action. These are the stat blocks. This is how small the spell stat blocks are, but still very, very flavorful and strong. So even air, right? So let's look at Flens. It's only a level 1 spell, and they're just divided into either utility or attack. So one creature object within short range. Windborg Grit scours the target. You make a will attack roll because air is the will stat. On a success, the target takes 2d6 plus 3 damage. A living creature that becomes incapacitated, which means their damage equals their health score, dies instantly. Its flesh, if any, stripped from its bones. And it also has a crit effect where the target takes 2d6 extra damage. So you're talking about a 2d6, so an average, that's 11 damage. So remember, level 1 characters have about 13 to 16 health. So that is massive. If you roll crit, it's an extra average 8 damage on top of that. So you're talking 19 damage. That is huge. And that's a level 1 spell. So spells in this game scale really well. So as the levels go up, you can see the damage will go up proportionally, and it actually keeps pace with melee attackers very well. So there's not that huge gap that D&D and Pathfinder have, where magic users just so outclass melee characters. Let's look at some damaging stuff. Curse is pretty good. Petrify. So this is so you gain corruption. This is a forbidden one. Making the attack roll with 3 boons if the target has 50 health or less. On a success, the target takes 76 plus 10 damage, which is a lot, and slowed for 1 minute. If they become incapacitated, they dies instantly and turns into a stone statue. So insta-death. And there's a crit where it takes 3d6 extra damage. That is huge. One of the things I forgot to mention is the traditions. When you discover a new tradition, you gain a free 0-level spell. And if you're a magician, your cantrip class feature actually gives you 2 0-level spells for free, when you discover a tradition. Very awesome. I think this is so good. It gives you nice flexibility and a nice trade-off for power, because a lot of your path choices will be discover tradition or choose one spell. So you can either choose a new tradition and diversify the spells you know, or you can choose any spell you want that you already have discovered and choose higher level spells. So while we're talking about magic, so this is point number 8, magic items. There are no magic item creation rules in the core rulebook. You actually can't create magic items with the exception of scrolls. So scrolls are called incantations, and it's magic written on a scroll, etched into a wax tablet, or painted on a piece of pottery. A big problem, one of my most hated features about Pathfinder and D&D are wands of Cure Light Wounds, or wands in general, but specifically Cure Light Wounds, because it trivializes a lot of things. It bypasses the needing of a healer, although healing kind of sucks in D&D and Pathfinder, especially like mid-combat healing. I think it's pretty... even if somebody makes that their job, it's not as good. But the wands make everything pretty terrible, because after a fight, you just smack each other with the happy stick, heal each other up. You can't make them. They're very rare. They're very special. You have to kill a strong enemy that has the item, find it in a dragon horde, what have you. But scrolls you can make, but it is very hard to use, because you have to make basically what would be a used magic device, but here it's a power roll. If your power is equal to, you make a roll, and then the target number is 10, then it can cast. For every level of power difference between you and the scroll, you take a bane that you're lower than what you need. So if your power is 2 and the spell's power 4, you make the roll with 2 banes, which makes it much harder to cast. So it makes scrolls kind of useful, but they do take a lot of resources. For treasure, for magic items, enchanted objects, which are what magic items are called, it gives nice advice on how many items you should have. So under awarding, as a general rule, characters should not have more enchanted objects than he or she has pass. Thus, a novice character should not have more than 1, an expert 2, and a master 3. So that means by endgame, you shouldn't have more than 3 magic items. Now, compare that to like D&D and Pathfinder, where you have all these body slots. Monsters, encounters, the mechanics assume that your characters have certain magic items, because your AC, your BAB, your attacks, your saves, they don't naturally increase, except for your BAB kind of increases, but they're not naturally increasing. The game assumes you have magic items to increase those stats, and it's built into the core. But the book doesn't tell you when you should get them, how many you should get. It doesn't give you thresholds that, oh, by 5th level, this should be your AC. This should be roughly your good and bad saves. Here, it tells you very simply, and they're not required. I don't like that the D&D Pathfinder, I'm just going to call them all D&D as a blanket. You need your Cloak of Resistance. You need your Ring of Protections, because some things are much more static, but the inflation is so big, you need those items. And there's nothing less interesting than having a magic item that you're required to have. You want those cool magic items, although not deck of many things, screw that magic item. But you want those like really cool, unique magic items that maybe they're not mechanically strong, but they're really flavorful, or they give you... you can use in interesting ways to overcome encounters that the GM didn't think about. And I think this game, Shadow of the Demon Lord, really brings back that mystique of having these really rare and powerful items that aren't required and that are really fun when you do get them. So, magic items, so much better in Shadow of the Demon Lord. Moving on to point 9 is the actual shadow. So, why is the game called Shadow of the Demon Lord? Well, the Demon Lord is this giant extra-dimensional being coming through the void to devour your world, but he actually has a shadow, and what the shadow is a mechanical effect that radiates this negative effect into the world, and what that effect does, you can actually choose for your campaign. First, this is amazing flavor, so you get 20 different effects you can choose for your campaign. So we have, let's see, the bloom. Plants just go wild and start growing over everything. Fall of civilization, which is the default in the core rulebook. Famine and drought, so everything starts drying up, turning to a desert. The restless dead, here's your zombie uprising. Weird magic, so whenever you cast magic, you roll on this magic table, and some weird effects have. Winter's grass, the entire world freezes over and everything just dies from the cold. So this is really cool. Also because the GM can use these to either make it a main goal of the campaign, or if it's not, if it's impossible to stop because it is tied to the Demon Lord coming itself, then it's just something going on in the background that escalates over time that makes the world more dangerous, and it just gives a nice theme or a unity to the campaign that underlies everything and kind of ties it together. And it also kind of is a ticking clock. As your characters increase level, the shadow also intensifies. There is a splat book that has different rankings for all of these effects. So for every path, the effect will upgrade and you'll get new features of that, which is very cool. I really like it. And number 10, this one's not in the core rulebook. This is the company, Schwab Entertainment as a whole, is that Shadow of the Demon Lord is supremely well supported. There are a lot of supplements, but without the bloat you'd normally think about when you think of splat books, because they're very small, short, cheap, and focused. There's a line for every aspect of the world. So for the setting, for additional rules, for characters, for monsters, there is a book line for that. There's also the large variety of stuff because there's so many aspects, but for GMs and players alike, and you can pick and choose exactly what you want, partly because it's so cheap. The biggest books that are a lot of expanded rules that are like between 30 and 60 pages are $10, and the smaller ones are usually between $2 and $4. Here's one of the ones I own. This is for ogres, ghastly gourmands. And the nice picture of an ogre eating looks like a horse up here. So this, you can see it's 9 pages. I believe this was like $2.99 maybe. And it'll tell you kind of the background of the ogres, kind of what their living style is, where you find them, what they do, their kind of reason for being. And it has a normal, kind of what a normal ogre, how to create one for GMs. Treasure found in their fecal mounds because they eat voraciously and they kind of just poop out some things they've eaten they don't even know about. So if you're brave enough to go through, you can look. You can customize ogres, so you can give them flatulence. They're infested by parasites, they're a mutant, and it tells you how to create those. There's also variant ogres. So here you have a boogeyman. There are Etin with this beautiful artwork. I love the artwork for this game. Here's a horned ogre. You'll notice from the cover of the rulebook. There's an Oni, a Stalo, Vojanoi, all kinds of stuff. So 9 pages, like $2 to $3. So if a GM wants to put an ogre, but maybe you guys have fought ogres before, so he wants to do a variant ogre or something else, or just switch things up so you don't expect it. There you go. And here's a setting book. So there's another one I have for the Grand Duchy. I ran one of my campaigns in this, so I went ahead and bought it. So this tells you about the Grand Duchy, one of the countries. So you have the background, the history, the different kinds of people. So it is a fiefdom. So there's nobles and serfs, soldiers and knights and sheriffs. You get a nice cool map, what the government and politics are. You get the ruler, some of the other minor nobles, the law, defense and witchcraft, the religion of the place. If you want to have adventures there, it has some ideas. And if you want a character, has some character options. Look, 10 pages. I think this one was like $2 or $3. There's additional books for magic, additional paths. There's optional rules. I mentioned the skill rule before, but there's different weapons, equipment rules. There's PowerPoints for magic if you want to use PowerPoint system. All kinds of things. This game is really good. So that's my top 10 reasons on why you should play the game. I hope some of you will take a look if you've heard of the game but were on the fence, or maybe you just heard it in passing but didn't know much about it. I hope this video helped to convince you to give this a look. I think the core rulebook is on Drive-Thru RPG. It's like $10 for the PDF. It is well worth your money. If you're sick of playing D&D and Pathfinder, or maybe that's all you've played, especially for fantasy games, and you didn't know there was something better out there, take a look at this game, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.